Hi everyone, Meteorologist Joel Curtis with your marine weather. Wednesday, August 28th. Starting out with tonight's weather, first we have a cold front descending from the Arctic across the eastern part of the North Slope and down through about the Bering Strait or so, connected to a 1007 millibar low near the Gulf of Anadyr. Also we have a 991 millibar low near Dutch Harbor with a full occluded front wrapped around it. And then for the eastern sections, we have a weak trough moving up to the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle. And high pressure was to the south. For Thursday, that low continues eastward, weakens a little bit to about 993 millibars or so. Full occluded front, but the warm front, warm air out ahead of it is strengthening a little bit. Also, you can see that there's a little bit of pressure gradient across southern southeast Alaska with a 1027 millibar high south of Haida Gwaii. A little bit of a trough up into the central portion of the state, and the cold front has moved past, but that should offer up some westerlies. And then for Friday's weather, the low is now weakened to 998 millibars south of Kodiak Island. A full occluded front still going on, and the warm front not moving very fast, but it's into the Gulf of Alaska. A little bit of a trough through the central portion of the state. Some good fetch between the cold front and the warm front in the Gulf. And then westerlies proceeding across the Arctic Ocean with the cold front now having exited the scene. So starting out with southeast Alaska, Thursday's marine forecast. On the outside waters, 15 to 20 knots. Seas up to about 8 feet or so. Some of that is a swell from the southwest. On the inside waters, 10 to 20 knots. Seas up to 3 feet. And then for Friday, on the outside, we have 15 to 25 knots, freshening with that new system moving into the Gulf. And then about 15 knots on the inside water, seas 3 feet. For Thursday's marine forecast for South Central, we have on the outside waters about 10 to 15 knots or so, and 10 knots in Cook Inlet, 10 knots in Prince William Sound. Seas up to 3 feet except for 5 feet off of Middleton Island or so. Then for Friday, we've got winds now respecting that low that's moving into the Gulf. 20 to 25 knots down through Cook Inlet, about 30 knots for Kennedy Entrance and off of Kodiak Island. Seas up to 8 feet there. And then notice the easterlies that we've got now responding to that circulation around the low. 25 knots, small craft advisory, seas up to 6 feet. Prince William Sound's remaining at 15 knots, seas 3 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, we got easterlies starting out on Thursday. On the Gulf side, winds in the southern part freshening up to 30 knots or so, seas 7 feet. But as you get off of Kodiak Island, 10 to 20 knots, seas up to about 5 feet or so. On the Bering Sea side, 20 to 30 knots and seas up to 5 feet with not a lot of fetch in that easterly wind. Then on Friday, what we've got is some of our winds are in gale force. Shelikof Strait, 35 knots northeasterly, seas 10 feet. Otherwise, 20 to 30 knots on the Gulf side, seas up to 9 feet, with a bit of a fetch there off of Sitkinak Island. And then 25 to 35 knots on the Bering Sea side, starting to have a little bit of a northerly component and seas up to 8 feet with a little bit more fetch, particularly down off of Coal Bay. So for the Aleutians, we have generally have a westerly component and some northerly component going on. On the Pacific side, winds ranging all the way from 15 up to gale force 40 knots, seas up to 13 feet south of Nikolsky. And then on the Bering Sea side, winds ranging from 25 up to gale force 35 knots and seas up to 12 feet. And then for Friday's forecast, again, good westerlies now behind that system that's moved into the Gulf. On the Pacific side, 15 ranging up to 30 knots, stronger wind the further closer to that low in the Gulf. Seas ranging up to 8 feet. There's still going to be some residual swell. And then on the Bering Sea side, 15 knots out in the far western Aleutians, but all the way up to 30 knots as you get off in Alaska, seas up to 8 feet. So for the west coast on Thursday, we've got generally easterlies with a northerly component. Winds ranging all the way up from a near calm 5 knots in Norton Sound on up to 20 knots in the Pribilofs and seas to 6 feet there. And then for Friday's forecast, winds generally 15 knots, definite northerly component, seas up to 5 feet off the Pribilofs, otherwise 3 to 4 feet the further north you get. And then for Bristol Bay, 25 knot northeasterly seas 3 feet with almost no fetch. And then for the Arctic coast, we've got generally westerlies following that cold front that moved through. And so up on the Beaufort Sea, 20 to 25 knots, seas up to 5 feet. And then as you get in between off of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, about 15 knots or so northerly, seas up to 3 feet. And then getting down closer to that low, 20 knots seas 4 feet down through the Bering Strait. Then for Friday, we've got generally westerlies. Again, that still feeling that cold front, even though it's moved way over into Canada. 20 to 25 knots on the North Slope side. Seas up to about 4 feet, 5 feet off of Kaktovik. And then a somewhat variable situation off of Cape Lisburne, 10 to 15 knots or so. And then the northerlies kick in through the Bering Strait, 15 to 20 knots, seas up to 4 feet there. So that's it for your marine forecast. Please let people know where you're going out on the water, and please, safe boating out there. Thank you.